Morning. I was looking at the weather outside, which is dreich, and I'm wondering if you could describe how you're feeling just now as an internal weather system. What would your internal weather be like? Also dreich? Is it sunny? Is it sunny? Okay. Somewhat sunny, cloudy, blustery. Yeah, here we are. So my name's Martha, and I am sharing research with you today that I've been doing in conjunction with the Alzheimer's Scotland Dementia Research Centre and the Edinburgh Centre for Research on the Experience of Dementia, and also the University of Edinburgh Chaplaincy. And the title of my talk today, Care Staff and Family Care Insights, and I'm talking about breaking chains of invisibility, and I will explain more about that as we go. I have been exploring freedom with people who are working in care homes and working in the community and also family carers. And the question is, why was I interested in exploring freedom with people? Well, we as human beings value freedom of having control over and being able to live our lives in the way that we choose. I did care work in 2013, house-to-house care work. And then I moved into a role in which I was doing support work for people living with dementia and carers. And my mother was diagnosed with dementia in 2015, and she now lives in a care home. And I heard and I saw impacts and I felt impacts of the dementia diagnosis on freedom and caring for the people who were doing the caring, as well as for the person who was experiencing the dementia. And really, I yearned to learn more about upholding freedom, what that is like and what it means. And I began my part-time studies in 2018. And I was still working at that time, part-time in dementia and carer support work, and was doing that carer support work until 2021. So I was doing that during the pandemic. Pandemic arrived in 2020. And then there was this widespread loss of freedom and major impacts in dementia caring. And my project had to change because I'd started it one way and I was going to be able to speak to people in the setting in which they lived, and then that changed and I had to turn it into something different. And what it turned into as something different is, I was already interested in speaking with people, so the qualitative approach was set. But what needed to happen was that in the pandemic I could only speak to people remotely. So I needed to talk with people online or on the telephone, which I did. And what I was doing was exploring the meaning of freedom to people who were family carers and people who were care staff. And when I talk to people in qualitative research, we don't get huge numbers because we get a lot of information from each person. So I conducted 22 in-depth one-to-one interviews. And when that's transcribed, that's about 20 pages, A4 pages. So I've got about 400 to 500 pages of information. So that's quite a lot of information to gather from people. And it's full of things that come from people's hearts. Yeah. There were more women than men who I studied. So there were 13 family carers. 6 of them were men and 7 of them were women. And 3 of those women were also working in a care staff role, although not necessarily with people living with dementia. There were 9 care staff who I was able to speak to, and all of them were women. And they were working in a range of roles and range of settings, so in the community and in care homes and in other types of environments. What I'm sharing with you today is what I'm calling emerging findings, which is a shorthand way of telling you my study isn't finished yet. I've not finished analysis. So these are emerging findings, and they're some of the things which are becoming evident across all of the interviews. So one of the biggest ones is experiences of invisibility or voicelessness from people who are caring for somebody. I'll go into that in more detail. Also, people told me about feeling trapped or imprisoned by their care circumstances, being stuck, not being able to get out. They told me about how they were having to compensate for systems that were failing. So in other words, the carer needed to fill the gap. That both family carers and people working in care homes told me that. People told me stories of how they needed to adapt things and they had to keep battling systems in order for anything to happen at all, including care homes. And they shared with me the emotional, practical, and physical well-being impacts on them. These are by no means the only things that people talked about. It's a snapshot of some of the major things that are emerging so far from the information that I'm looking through now. What I want to share with you today is some of the quotes directly from the interviews that people shared with me about experiences of invisibility or voicelessness. And as we go through these quotations, they definitely speak of invisibility or voicelessness. You will see in the quotations, that's not, in the quotes I'm sharing here, they often share something that's more than about that too, which we won't be able to go into today, but you'll see there's complexities even in something they're talking about here with experiences of invisibility. Incidentally, the arrows that I have here don't mean that I'm thinking that one thing causes the other. What I'm meaning is everything is interconnected. That's all that those arrows mean. Okay. So I've got family carers and staff carers. And this first page here is family carers in green. And when people sign up to my study, when they agreed to take part, they said that I could share quotes that they were telling me, in the research process, including in talks. But these are not their real names, okay? So let me tell you about the first one here. This is from Christopher, and he says, and so the official structures, your local government and social work and all the rest of it, we never heard anything from them, no engagement whatsoever. They basically don't exist in terms of dementia and things you need. They're meant to do things like assessments and so on, both carers' assessments and for the person being cared for. But these never happened, and this was pre-pandemic. And Annie says, and I just don't understand why, if you've got family members saying, we need help, we need support, we don't get that support because the person who needs the support is saying they don't want it. But actually, they don't have the mental capacity to be making these decisions. And you'll see here one of these complexities I mentioned, because of course we're talking about the freedom of the person living with dementia who says they don't want to have this care. So there's much to consider when we're looking at issues of freedom. And then Jack says about trying to get services, a lot of the time you just repeat and repeat things. And these are now coming from the interviews with people who were working as care staff in some capacity or another. So Karen says, but we were getting told to leave residents and not treat. We were getting told that we weren't to have PPE. It was just like the care homes didn't matter. And that's what's so frustrating, because then after the pandemic, it was like the care homes didn't do anything right. And that's how it felt. That's how it feels. And Martina, who works in care work in the community, says, I feel like care workers don't have a voice. And I feel like the people we care for don't have a voice. I would like care work to be more valued. And she goes on in the interview to talk about monetarily valued too. She would like at least a 50% increase in pay. Lauren says, so many people were suddenly getting involved in care home guidelines, but from a place where they didn't truly understand what care homes are like and had probably never set foot in a care home. A lot of the residents became very withdrawn and didn't want to eat and drink. Suddenly, life as they knew it had stopped, and we had residents saying to us that there's no point living like this. So emotional. And Nell says, in terms of being listened to and whose opinions are valued, I was probably saying and raising the same things when I worked in a care role. But now, in a different type of care-related role, I can feel free to say these things. I think it's about who we listen to. You can put on a different hat, and suddenly people will come to you, and you have the freedom to share those views and be heard. So what are the implications for carers? Well, all of these issues about human dignity and human freedom connect with human rights. And a lot of the examples, when people were talking to me about freedom, they shared how their human rights were not being upheld, especially what we are known as positive rights. Positive freedoms and positive rights are about systems and structures. So it says here, the rights that provide something people need to secure their well-being, such as the right to food, medical care, right to housing, the duty actively to help a person do something. So that's all systemic. Negative rights are about not interfering, things that we leave people alone. So carer insights such as these are so important. Provided positive rights are being upheld, and there's a new framework coming in Scotland about it, including how this is going to be accountable in terms of the structures and systems, then this gives a real opportunity for carers' voices to be heard. So we can help break the chains of invisibility. Thank you.